All right, welcome back. This is the last video of this specific first half before you start working with Monica. And what we'll do here is implement the infinite scroll, okay? All right, so what do we want to do here? Again, we have our pull to refresh, but we want the user to not just be stuck at the end here. If they were to read a whole bunch of tweets and get to the end here, we then want to pull even more tweets, right? So we just get 20 in the beginning, and then we let them kind of scroll through and keep going until they get tired. And how do we do that? Well, we're going to have to create another function. So right now we have one here that we called load tweet. And this one is the function that gets triggered twice, right? So, well, two ways. First of all, it gets triggered automatically the first time we load our screen. And then the second time, it also gets triggered anytime somebody does the pull to refresh. And the reason why we're going to write a second one is because this one here always runs with 20 tweets. I want another function that I'm going to call load more tweets, for example, that doesn't just add 20 tweets. It first adds 20, or it just adds, well, it first starts with 20 and then maybe adds 10 more, and then when they scroll down, it adds 10 more. So something that changes over and over again. And it's going to be very, very similar to what we have up here. So I'm going to make some space here, and then I'm going to start writing. So it's going to be called load more tweets. So I'm going to write func and then load more tweets. I just realized up here that I have this one singular. The way to rename a variable in Xcode is by selecting it. If you want to change, don't just change it manually and then go find it. You're going to break a bunch of things. So select it, right click or control click, and then rename. There's this nifty, nice little feature that allows you to rename basically everywhere that variable is used. So I'm going to add an S there, enter, and there you go. Now it added an S there, it also did it there, and it also did it there. All right, because we're loading more than one tweet, right? All right, so load more tweets. What does this thing do? Well, it's still going to get the number of tweets. So my URL will always be the exact same. So I'm going to have another my URL here, which is basically the exact same endpoint or the exact same API call right there, right? The only thing that I'll change is the way I'm setting these the counts, right? So right now I'm always setting it to 20, but here what I want here is to set. Oh, actually realize that we actually have a number of tweets up here that we actually haven't used yet, right? So what we could do is when we first load, so I'm going to go back to my load tweets here. This is going to make much sense. It's going to make a lot of sense. So when we first load, or when we first load tweets, so instead of calling a number like this, what I'm going to do is set number of tweets to be 20, and then instead of writing 20 here, I'm going to write number of tweets. All right, this is the exact same thing we're doing, but at least right now we're using this variable. So now down here, even though I'm calling the exact same URL, well, I'm going to do something really cool with my number of tweets. So I'm going to go, okay, whatever the number of tweet is at this point, okay, add an additional number of tweet on top of that. So I'm going to add 20 every single time. All right, so if my number of tweet is 20, and then you call load more tweets, I'm going to get that number of tweet, and it's going to be equal to whatever the current value is, which is 20, plus 20 more. So now we're going to have 40. And then if you call load more tweet again, now this value here is 40. Well, we're going to get whatever that value is, so 40. We're going to add 20 on top of that, and now it's 60. So we're going by increments of 20 and 20 and 20 anytime we call this thing. However, when the screen loads back, so for example, we're coming back from the login screen to the home screen, or when we pull down to refresh, it's going to call this thing and it's going to set it to be exactly 20. So again, we start over with that original count, okay? So then what do I do with this kind of incremental number? I'm going to do the exact same thing I did up here. So my parameter now will be, so let my params, I think is what I called it, will be equal to, and then the key again is counts, and then number of tweets. And then we can basically just copy everything that you have up here. All right, so just make sure that you're copying the right thing. So I'm just going to copy that and put it up there. Because then I was just going to write this exact same API call and then tell it which URL I'm using and then which parameters I'm using and then what to do when we succeed and what to do when we fail. We're not going to do any kind of refresh control. No, refresh control is never going to call load more tweets. So I can technically get rid of this, but it doesn't hurt if you leave it there. All right. If you see a bunch of warnings like that, you can just do Command B to build your project. And okay, it's succeeded. I think we can ignore these warnings. Okay, let's just ignore them for now. All right, let's run those. You can ignore anything that's yellow and you can't ignore anything that's red. Perfect. So now we have our table or our list of tweets, and I can do it pull down to, well, I can scroll down. Let me try to see if it works. Does it work? No, it doesn't work. Why not? Well, even though we've written load more tweets, we are not actually using it anywhere, right? It's just, again, once more, it's just floating in the air, kind of like, okay, when do I get to get used? Well, you have to tell Xcode, call this thing anytime the user scroll and they get close to the end of the table, go ahead and go ahead and do load more tweets. Does that make sense? So we want to call this at a specific time. So if we could also have a button, for example, that is tied to this action to what, when I say click on this button and call this, we can have anything call this load more tweet. But since we're doing the infinite scroll, we want to trigger this thing when the user gets to the end of the page. And what I'm going to do here is just paste code again. It's just a few lines of code, and this is what you do if you want something to happen when the user scrolls and gets to the end of the table. So just feel free to copy this or type it as well. So this is it right here. You can feel free to kind of read here and understand what it does, but just know that what we're doing here is basically, I have a misspell here, so it's load more tweets. Oops, load more tweets. Basically, this is what we do when we want something to happen when the user gets to the end of the page, okay? And what I'm doing here is basically saying when they get to the end of the page, run load more tweets, okay? Now let's give it another shot. All right, launch screen, home screen, we have our tweets, and then I'm gonna scroll all the way to the bottom. And just the way to know that we're actually loading more tweets, for example, is by looking at the size of the bar that you see on the side here on the right side. You could also count as we go. So I'm gonna go, and when I get to the end, boop, it's gonna load more. And then when I get to the end, boop, it loads more. And then what I can do is, of course, go back here and do a pull down to refresh. And when I do that, what it's going to do is basically pull just the initial 20 list of tweets. There you go. All right. Well, we've made it through part 1 of the Twitter module. Hopefully you've learned a lot of things. I know this was a lot of information, but I did my best, I think, to kind of give you as much detail, but also not letting you be overwhelmed by the amount of information. With what you have right now, you can, build a whole new screen. You can pull any other information that you want. You have now access to the Twitter API page, and you can pull so much more information and display in your app. You've learned how to do the pull down to refresh. You've learned how to do the infinite scroll. And now what you're going to learn with Monica is actually how to post your own tweets and how to actually how to actually interact with these tweets that you see on your screen. And like I said, at the end of this, you'll be in a position where you can build your own apps. And I really hope I can see some of your apps on the App Store someday. All right. All right, enjoy the rest of the program, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.